All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here with a preview and prediction for the 2025 Auburn Tigers football team. Looking at the staff in the offseason headlines: Hugh Freeze, 11-14 record through 2 seasons. Derek Nix and DJ Durkin both enter their second years in their respective roles as offensive and defensive coordinator. Great work in terms of recruiting, 8th on the high school ranks, and then in the portal, they also pulled in the 8th best class. A lot of new fresh faces here, lots of talent coming to Auburn after a 5-7 campaign where they went 2-6 in conference play. Almost anything that could go wrong for Auburn last year went wrong for them. A lot of close losses there, a lot of embarrassing ones as well. This team's loaded with talent. Let's dive into this offense, Nick. I really love what they've accomplished this offseason. They went out and, they got a new quarterback, and they've also got a great group of weapons, for Jackson Arnold to work with. Starting with Arnold, this is a guy that's a good touch passer, has football IQ, controls the velocity quite well. I think he's good on the move. I think he has nice awareness in the pocket, has a good arm. Inconsistent vision, though, can get antsy under pressure. His mental processing is still iffy. This is a former 5-star, though, Nick, and I think that, this is a guy that a lot of people have forgotten about because last year Oklahoma was very bumpy for him, and we knew it was going to be a struggle entering the preseason when we looked at their offensive line. They replaced absolutely everybody, right? And they ended up having the worst offensive line in the country. And at the same time, the top 7 wide receivers were injured all year long for Oklahoma. So it was just a perfect storm of bad for a young quarterback into his first year as a starter, Nick, and that led to Arnold not having a very impressive performance top to bottom. Now he arrives at Auburn where he's going to have a much better system. I love his coaches here, a lot better than the staff they had last year at Oklahoma. I think this is a perfect scenario for Arnold to really unleash his talents this season. Are you going to put that 2024 behind him, or are you still going to, credit to that him a little bit?
I think Arnold's a really incredibly talented player. Obviously, coming out of high school, he's a 5-star for a reason. And Auburn here, they've completely revamped this quarterback room heading into 2025, which is something they need to do. Last year, the quarterback room just wasn't cutting it. Peyton Thorne threw away some games, especially early in the season. He got benched at one point. Hank Brown came in, and he didn't really do a whole lot much better there. Thorne, eventually moves on. They move on from Thorne. He got better during the second half of the season, certainly cut down on the turnovers, looked better throughout the second part of the season, but overall still was not really going to lead this team anywhere very far. They ended up with a very bad losing record in conference play. And a losing record overall for Hugh Freeze, who's still trying to right the ship down there on the Plains after a 6-7 and a 5-7 campaign to kick off his first 2 years at Auburn. They bring in Arnold. He goes to the portal. He starts working on the portal quickly, which I think was a very key thing for him to do. He brings in Jackson Arnold, brings in 2 other quarterbacks as well, one on the portal and one a recruit that we're going to talk about in a second here. Arnold, didn't have the best time in Oklahoma, but like you said, had a very bad offensive line, and the system was not really benefiting him, in my opinion. He still threw 1,400 yards passing, had 12 touchdowns and 3 picks. Got benched, came back, got benched, so went back and forth a little bit. He was involved in the offense. He also had 444 yards on the ground and 3 scores, so still solid production through 10 games. He ends up transferring to Auburn. I think this is a better fit for him. The system, I think, is really solid. The weapons he has, they added some great weapons out of the portal. They return a lot of great weapons as well. I think Arnold could be primed for success early on in this offense with Hugh Freeze masterminding the play calling.
In Freeze's first couple of years, he didn't really take the quarterback position all that seriously, and I think now after last year's, debacle, they put in great effort, getting Arnold and then Ashton Daniels from Stanford, I think, who can be a really effective player for them if he needs to come into action. And then 5-star Deuce Knight, he's going to see the field at some point. He's expected to, contribute significantly to this program. So I love to see Freeze show that urgency. Gave Thorne a chance, which I certainly can appreciate. Didn't work out, though. Time to move forward. You talk about those weapons, Nick. This is a team that added 9 guys out of the portal. The biggest one being Eric Singleton, elite player here coming over from Georgia Tech. Great speed, has versatility, really good route runner, nice leaping ability as well. He's going to join up with a guy in Hirohito Field from Wake Forest. I love the size on this guy, 6'3", 205. Great ability and balance to catch downfield. He's got good hands. He's a nice third down red zone option. Struggles to get off the line of scrimmage, though. Limited speed, doesn't provide much yak. He's a pure possession receiver. But the good thing is, Nick, they have a lot of versatility in this room. And, of course, Cam Coleman, he was a 5-star in last year's class. Really emerged late in the year. Showcases good length. He can high point the ball with authority. Elite level body control. I love the focus he brings to the table. Malcolm Simmons, he should continue to thrive in the slot, showcasing good lateral quickness. He's a nice downfield weapon. He was a good gunner on special teams as well. You look at some of the other guys, Perry Thompson barely played last year, but he was also a high-ranked recruit in last year's cycle. Lots of impressive traits to like about him. Bryce Cain's a pure speedster. Wasn't utilized either outside of, the season opener. And the tight end room's kind of weak. Brandon Frazier's a respectable blocker. Preston Howard under 200 yards in 2 straight seasons for Maryland. They did pick up a 4-star in Hollis Davidson, who has, they're saying advanced pass catching capability, so he might get on the field early. Looking at these wide receivers, though, Nick, I love the versatility here, and it's exactly why I think Arnold's going to thrive this season.
I think Arnold will certainly thrive with these weapons here. Just going to quickly, cap off the quarterback room. Daniels was not a bad quarterback at Stanford, was the leading rusher for them with about 650 yards and 3 scores. Had 1,700 yards passing and 10 touchdowns. So a good veteran guy to have in your locker room. Deuce Knight, Auburn fans are very high on him. They think he's going to be the talent that they were really hoping for. A really solid win for them on the recruiting trail. They battled Notre Dame to get that commitment there. Deuce Knight looks to be profiles to be a really strong athletic player in the SEC. This is a very young wide receiver room with a lot of sophomores here, other than Singleton and Fields, who they bring in, but they return 3 sophomores who got some reps last year in Coleman, Simmons, and Thompson, who all solid. Thompson limited reps, but still had a touchdown on 5 grabs, 126 yards. He's a high-profile name. They're hoping to get involved early on in this offense. Simmons was a really impressive player that we didn't expect him to be as impressive, in my opinion. 451 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns. And then Coleman had a really strong season. Was a great asset for them at wide receiver. 600 yards receiving, 16.2 yards per grab, and 8 scores. Really good numbers out of him. I think Singleton's an incredible add out of the portal. He was a guy that was really good at Georgia Tech, a reliable wide receiver you can plug into this offense and get success out of Fields. A really good add that adds some veteran leadership. He'll be able to fight for some catches as well. They added some freshmen from this class as well that they're hopeful could be involved in this offense. It's a very young receiving core that got a lot of experience last year, can only improve from here, in my opinion. They have a great quarterback throwing the ball to them, which could really help out this offense. This offense should certainly take a huge step forward this year. They were scoring about 27.8 points per game last year. I think they can easily clear 30, pushing 32 points per game with the way that this offense is set up.
Now you look at this backfield. The ground game was pretty good last year. Jarquez Hunter moves on after a couple of really stout seasons for them. It's going to be a by-committee approach, I would say, this year. It's probably the weakest part of this offense. Damari Alston, he's a contact-thriving back. Minimal touches during his career, though. Jeremiah Cobb has good long speed. Best when getting outside the tackles. They have a 4-star in Alvin Henderson, who should have some opportunities early. Great quickness. He's good in either scheme, man or zone blocking. Nice physicality as well. And then Darrell Robinson from UConn. He's a player that showcases a great one-cut ability, especially for his size. He's got good speed, impressive vision as a zone runner. He did play poor competition, though. Wasn't used much in gap schemes. Again, he was just mostly zone. And he's been really just a pure check-down option in the pass game. I think this is a respectable backfield here, Nick. I think if Robinson come over and still be effective for this backfield and Henderson can bring something to the table, then they'll certainly have a nice group. But I think for the most part, you're going to see them splitting hairs when it comes to touches.
Yeah, I think it'll certainly be a by-committee approach here. I think Alston's a solid back who plugs into this offense. Had 276 yards rushing and 3 scores last year. Not terrible numbers. Cobb had about 150 yards on the ground. No scores for him. I think the other 2 backs that you listed off there are 2 guys that have interesting stories. Potentially, Robinson coming over from UConn. What's his workload going to look like? Is he going to get a ton of touches early on? Is he going to be involved in the offense? Is he a guy they could potentially use on 3rd down? I'm curious to see what he looks like. And then Henderson is a back that they have a lot of faith in. Coming out of the high school ranks, curious to see how many touches he gets early on. I think Alston's a good back. I think the speed on him is solid. I think the field vision's good. Looking to see what he can do with an increased load. They don't have that Jarquez Hunter to rely on anymore. That's certainly a big hole to fill. Curious to see what their offense looks like on the ground this year.
I move to the offensive line. Left tackle wasn't the worst position in the world for them, but they certainly did have some struggles. It was kind of an inconsistent spot. So they went to the portal and picked up one of the top guys available, an Xavier Chaplin from Virginia Tech. This guy showcases a great motor, plays till the end of the play, has good footwork and pass protection, physicality and power as a run blocker. He can at times get pushed back, but he always seems to anchor down. He was inconsistent in pass pro, but he never got bullied or dominated. At 6'7", 323, brings a lot of size to this conference. Dylan Wade played the most snaps at left tackle last fall. He's going to kick inside the left guard. He struggled in pass pro a good bit, but he spent time at both spots. 6'3", 303 pounds. The permanent move should benefit him, I would say, moving inside. Connor Lew at center. He was sensational. He was pretty poor week 2 versus Cal. He was dominant the rest of the way. One of the best centers in college football. The right side features 2 players who've been relatively, above average. Jeremiah Wright at right guard played a good bit the last 3 seasons. He was reliable in pass pro last year as a starter. And then you have a right tackle, Xavier Miller. He hasn't been very good in 2 years as a starter. He's going to battle with a couple of guys there. Tyler Johnson, Mason Murphy coming over from USC. Plenty of experience and versatility from him, but has also never shown great potential. Should find time during the season. Tyler Johnson, 6'6", 320. has the makings of being an overwhelming run blocker, but he was smoked in pass protection in his appearances last year. I think this offensive line should be good, Nick. The ceiling certainly elevated with the experience in the new left tackle. Good potential here from this O-line.
Good potential certainly here. Chaplin, I think, was a really good add for Virginia Tech. He can add a lot at left tackle. I think Wade will certainly play a lot better playing at guard. The move interior will benefit him. Connor Lew, the standout piece on this offensive line, a really good center. Had a rough first 2-3 weeks last year, but really came around, certainly in SEC play. He was their best offensive line asset during SEC play last year. I expect a big year out of him. Jeremiah Wright's not a bad right guard. Expecting to see what he can do this year, maybe potentially bump up that game a little bit. I think Mason Murphy's going to start adding him out of the portal. I think it was a really solid add. He's a good veteran guy that's got some reps at different programs. Tyler Johnson would not surprise me if they went with Johnson as the starter, but I think right now Murphy is penciled as a starter. I think that makes a lot of sense. Johnson is a guy that's got some good experience as well. Could be a solid younger asset to potentially plug in on that right side there. I think the left side's really strong with Chaplin and Wade. I think the center and Lou is the best offensive line piece on this team overall. This is a unit that's hoping to take a step forward here, protect their quarterback, and be strong in the trenches.
The offensive verdict from me, the Tigers' offense really struggled last season due to limitations at quarterback. Arnold himself struggled at OU due to, unfortunate circumstances. I really see this group exploding big time due to a talented supporting cast, an offensive line that will be improved, and a quarterback in Arnold who will play to his potential. I think this group's going to shock people, Nick. I think they're going to post around 30 to 35 points per game in this conference. Lofty expectations, but I really think Arnold is going to be the real deal now that he has some help. I love what the staff's going to be able to accomplish with him at quarterback. Might be some growing pains early, but I think they're really going to be clicking on all cylinders come back half of the season.
Yeah, I think you and I agree on the verdict in this offense. I said around 30 to 32 points per game. You're saying anywhere from 30 to 35. I think we're right in the same ballpark, right? Yes, losing Jacquez Hunter and Keandre Lambert-Smith are two big losses, as well as Fairweather, who was really reliable tight end. But they returned three young wide receivers who all had meaningful minutes last year. Cam Coleman is a star in the making in college football, a future first-round pick, in my opinion, who is a really talented receiver. Got a better quarterback throwing to him this year. I think this is an opportunity for this offense to really step up under Hugh Freeze. He really knows how to work with some talented quarterbacks. He's done that in the past. I think you get a lot of Jackson Arnold here. I think Robinson was not a bad ad from UConn. Curious to see what he looks like on this rushing attack. I'm worried about what they can do on the ground. I think that was a big part of their offense last year. Can it still be a part of their offense this year? They were about 165 yards per game. Can they get to a similar number like that? Only time will tell.
Now we move to the defensive side of the ball. This is a pretty respectable group for Auburn last year. They were never really much of a liability. They returned 5 starters. Look at the defensive line. They have a 5-star in Amaris Williams entering his second season. A quick twitched pass rusher with great length and power. Zycavius Walker enters his 5th season in CFB. He's been quite good. He's been a nice big body versus the run. Kieran Crawford will be a top candidate to fill that Buck hybrid role. He was solid last year, but he was quiet last year, that is, but in 2023 at Arkansas State, he had 10.5 tackles for loss. He's a player with nice speed and agility. They picked up Chris Murray from Sam Houston State at defensive end. I thought, on tape, this guy showed good use of hands and arms, lots of strength, has good quickness and speed. Jamonte Waller enters his second year as a former high-ranked 4-star. I think this edge group is absolutely loaded, Nick. And, of course, to cap it off, Kendrick Falk. This is a guy that some people think could go number 1 in the draft next year as a top defender off the board. A guy that showcases a great first step, nice body control, length and bend for his size of 6'6", 288 is pretty impressive. He can stack and shed versus the run. He was phenomenal against the run this past year. He was second in sacks as well for this team. He's a real alpha dog type of player. This is a SEC defensive line, Nick, and we haven't even talked about the interior yet.
This is a good unit coming off the edge here. I think Kendrick Falk is a really good player to bring back Keldrick Falk. That is a really talented player who had 45 total tackles last year, 11 tackles for loss, 7 sacks, double-digit tackle for loss, was really strong on this defensive line, a guy that had a lot of pressure. I like the moves on him. The footwork is really solid, the hands as well. This is a guy that's really aggressive, finds a way to get in the backfield. I think he's a really big key asset. I think Crawford at that Buck position will be really solid as well. 22 total tackles, 8 tackle for loss for him last year. Hoping to see what he can do this year, be a little bit better. Chris Murray will fight for that position at the Buck position. I think he's a really talented asset coming over there, a really good add out of the portal. Williams is not a bad player that will get some reps as well, replacing Falk at time. This is a defensive edge group that's really good. I think Falk is a really strong asset. He's highly rated for a reason. He's a big physical player, had a pass breakup and a forced fumble last year as well. This is a guy that can do it all, a big number there. Expecting double-digit sacks out of him this year. He's going to be a home wrecker for sure.
Now you look at this interior, they get back Quintrell, Jamison Travis. Didn't do a whole lot, but he was on the field a good bit last season. Malik Blockton's, I think, going to be the standout here. Should keep adding size, and he was solid versus the run last year. Picked up Dallas Walker from Western Kentucky. He wasn't all that great for them, but he's a big body, 6'4", 318. In terms of veteran depth, it's kind of limited, but this group added 4 freshmen on the interior, most of them having advanced size for their youth, including Malik Autry. Really like the potential of this D-line again, Nick. This is a group that can perform at a high level in the SEC. A lot of big bodies that are big, physical, and nasty. I think last year Texas had like 8 300-plus pounders, Nick, and that's where you want to be if you want to be elite up front. And that's kind of what Auburn's starting to do here, adding the guys with a lot of size, ones that have impressive traits coming off the edge. I think this is a really good group.
I think Blockton and Jamison Travis are 2 solid players to return for this defensive line interior here. I think Jamison Travis, expect a bigger load out of him. He got a lot of snaps last year, wasn't entirely productive during those snaps. 14 total tackles for him, 2 tackles for loss, and a sack. Expect a little bit more out of him this year. He's got some good experience. He's played a couple reps here. Blockton had more productivity last year, 16 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. A big body there that I think is really solid. Those are 2 solid players in the interior. I think the added Walker is a really solid add out of the portal, a guy that didn't have the best time at his previous stop, but still a guy that I think has a lot of room and potential to grow here. I think Walker's Walker's going to be a really solid asset they add out of the portal here. I'm looking for a big year out of Blockton. This is a guy that's a younger player, got some good reps last year, hoping to see what he can do this year.
Looking at the middle of this defense, this is the biggest concern for Auburn and their entire football team, I'd say, is the middle of their defense. Robert Woodyard enters his 4th year. Finally expected to see some good on-field time. He's been a good tackler in his appearances. DeMarcus Riddick, he played a good bit as a freshman last fall, has nice awareness, made some big plays later in the year. He's going to be a full-time starter, and he's expected to be the leader this fall in the middle. I think they really like the potential of Xavier Adkins, the guy from LSU, brings a good athletic profile to the table. 2 X3 stars in DJ Barber and Elijah Melendez. It's a very young group, but I don't have this feeling that they're going to be a major liability just because of that youth, Nick. I think they're going to have a clear game plan, and this system kind of allows them to go through the growing pains and not be a major liability. Top 3 linebackers from last year are gone, though, Nick. So are you concerned at all? Because the backups pretty inexperienced, and even Riddick, he's still just a second-year player.
Yeah, I'm certainly concerned about this linebacking unit. I think it's the weakest part of this team for sure. I think it's a young unit that's very inexperienced. I think Riddick had some good reps last year, 27 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks for him. Decent numbers there. Robert Woodard had 17 total tackles and 3 tackles for loss plus a pass breakup. He's got some good reps in the past here. They added Atkins, who could be a solid player, fight for some reps there as well. This is a young unit, right? Young, inexperienced unit. They lost a lot of top production from last year. Riddick, he's going to have to step up and really play good football this year. He showed some strength last year. He was solid in coverage at times, was good against the run. He's going to be really phenomenal this year, going to take that big step forward if this linebacking core wants to be competitive in a really tough SEC.
They also picked up J.J. Falk, true freshman, the brother of Kendrick. So I think this is a linebacking group they'll do, solid. I think they'll get better as time goes on. Looking at the secondary, they return 2 pretty good corners in Kalen Lee, Jay Crawford. Both are undersized, about 180 pounds. The latter had 7 pass breakups, though only allowed 179 yards in coverage. They're really confident in these starters, I would assume. The backups probably not as much, mainly due to just the depth being limited. Rayon Strather, he's a battle-tested veteran from Miami of Ohio. He's been targeted 183 times over the last 2 years. Limits the yak, though, has 26 plays on the ball. He's a competitive player indeed, Nick. I know he's allowed a lot of yards in coverage again, though. Those are, a ton of targets. They went after him a lot, and, he produced well for them. J.C. Hart hasn't gotten much go in his first 2 years. Champ Anthony was really impressive in his 4 games last year. Played a variety of different roles, so he can be used at corner. Likely going to occupy the slot, though. At safety, Caleb Harris was exceptional. Really shined as a tackler and versus the run. A little bit more shaky in coverage against those tougher opponents, but was good across the board. Picked up Tay Seymour. He was awful for Georgia Tech. He did play 400-plus snaps. Anquan Fagan's, a top 10 safety during the incoming class. So they have some options, but opposite of Harris, could be, a growing process for the back end. The secondary did struggle to cover the last 2 games of the year. The corners versus A&M were bad, and then the safeties were poor against Alabama, Nick. So you had a little bit of, bad from the entire group. Potential is here, but they need consistency versus that tougher competition. Do you expect to see it, or do you think there's going to be more of a fall-off?
I think this is a weak unit safety unit's a little bit weaker here. I do like what these corners can do. I think Lee is a really talented player, 32 total tackles, 7 pass breakups, 2 picks for him, while Crawford, his partner, had 15 total tackles, a pick, and 7 pass breakups. I think these are 2 good 1-2 punch there. I worry a little bit about Crawford. He's a younger player, so certainly a bit inexperienced. They bring in Stratter to give him a little competition. I think he was a decent player at Miami, Ohio. Like you said, though, had some issues that you highlighted, so I won't harp on that. But I think he is a player here in Crawford that's a younger guy, so he's going to get some reps here, see what he can can do. I think they bring back Harris, who was a really solid safety for them. And again, another player who's a bit on the younger side. He's a guy that they're looking for another big step out of him. 46 total tackles, a tackle for loss, 3 pass breakups. Was a lot better production, I think, most Auburn fans expected out of him. Last year, he's a guy that's a really talented asset. Sylvester Smith is not a bad player either, with 28 total tackles, a pick, and 2 pass breakups. They're hoping he could be involved, moving around a free safety, see what they can do there. The secondary is not an awful unit, certainly. I think it's a middle of the pack unit in the SEC. There are some talented players, but again, a younger unit's got to find a way to step up against these tougher offenses they're going to face in the SEC.
They also recently picked up a commitment from Rayshon Pleasant coming over from Tulane. He was really good in coverage last year, played about 400 reps at outside corner for the Green Wave. So I think this is a defense that's got a lot of promise. This side of the ball was phenomenal for the Tigers and should be just as good in 2025. I like the D-line they have, as Freeze has built a group that has the size and attributes to compete at a high level, while the secondary is good young players all around. And again, I think this linebacker group could be the weak link of this unit in the entire football team, but I don't anticipate them being it too bad to where, they get, leaned on against opposition where it's going to put this defense in bad situations, Nick. I think this is a great defense here. Middle of the defense, it's going to be a little iffy, I think, to begin with, but it's not going to, cause them to lose football games.
This is a good defense here. This is a defense that's got some returning experience. I think it's a bit of a younger unit, still one of the middle of the pack units in the SEC, but still a unit that's strong. They gave up 21.3 points per game last year. That was a decent number. They were solid against the run last year. They struggled against the pass. Sometimes they can find some improvements against the pass. This could be a really good defense come the end of the season.
Looking at the final prediction for Auburn with this schedule, the Tigers are a sleeping giant with the staff and a roster full of young talent. Auburn should be lethal with a productive offense, and if they get one in 2025, they'll be able to beat anyone in the country. I think the Tigers will do just that in being competitive weekly and contend for the conference. But the youth movement at times will expose them on both sides of the ball and will hold them back, I think, from lofty goals. Nick, 9-3 for me. All 3 losses coming consecutively to Oklahoma, Texas A&M, and at home to Georgia. They can win all of those games, Nick. They're only 1-point favorites right now to start the season, though, at Baylor. So let's go ahead and focus on that first before we, jump to conclusions of how good this team will be. But I think they get the job done in Waco, and I think they cap the season off of a major win over Alabama as well. What do you think of this, Nick? Because I know it's crazy to think a team can be that good and lose 3 in a row. They can beat Georgia, though, and Oklahoma and A&M. I think those are going to be their blemishes. This is a very good team, though.
This is a very talented team that's playing another tough schedule in the SEC. They benefit playing both Georgia and Alabama at home. As an Alabama fan, I'm already having nightmares about that Iron Bowl matchup down there at Jordan-Hare. Crazy things happen even when Alabama has won the last 2 games at Jordan-Hare. It took a miracle twice to get the job done. It's a very tough place to play. I am, sweating as an Alabama fan thinking about that already. Just looks to be a tough spot, especially if Alabama's in contention for a playoff spot or Auburn's in contention for a playoff spot when this comes down on November 29th. When you look at the scheduling, the trip to Baylor on a Friday night is very interesting. I think that's a game they're going to lose. That's my other loss here. I have them at 8-4 on the season. I think this is a very talented roster. I think they can win that game at Baylor, but I wouldn't be surprised to get caught napping early on in Waco and the Bears pull off an upset, a slight upset, as like you said, they're about a 1.5 point underdogs right now. Tough stretch traveling to Oklahoma A&M and then hosting Georgia. They could potentially beat Georgia. They gave Georgia a run for their money 2 years ago down on the Plains as well. It took a really nice pass from Beck to their star tight end to bail them out there. So I think it's certainly, Brock Bowers, that is. So it certainly is possible that this Auburn team could give Georgia a run for their money at home. I think they certainly will give them a run for their money at home, especially if they're playing good football at that moment in time. Intriguing, they're playing South Alabama, in-state matchup. You don't see a whole lot from the bigger programs in the state of Alabama, so I'm curious to see how that matchup goes. A good roster from the group of 5 in Mobile that's returning. Tough trip to Oklahoma and A&M. I think it's going to lose those games, but the back half of the schedule is very manageable. I think Missouri, Kentucky, and Arkansas, Vanderbilt are all very manageable games they'll be able to win. Of course, Vanderbilt has a history of, giving Auburn fits. Is that a game maybe that could be a potential trap game? Diego Pavia is still at Vanderbilt, so maybe keep an eye on that one November 8th. This is a very talented roster. But then again, Hugh Freeze had a talented roster last year. Can he finally put it together as a team that's had 2 losing seasons under Hugh Freeze? If they have a losing season this year, his seat's going to get warm on the Plains. They mean business down there. They want results immediately. In year 3, if he's not putting results on the board, he's going to feel some pressure from those boosters and from the fan base. They got to get a winning record this year. They got to find themselves in a bowl game, winning that bowl game. I think 8-4, 9-3 would be very respectable and would ease some of that pressure on Hugh Freeze down there.
Yeah, this is a team that averaged 14 points per game in their 7 losses. All these losses were quite close. If they just had half a better unit, they certainly could have accomplished a lot more last year. So it wasn't very vindictive of overall how good this team could have been. So I think this year, if the offense likely to progress, and if they hit 35 points per game, Nick, I mean, this team might go undefeated, quite frankly. I think that they could beat Georgia and, maybe split those road games. So I think this is a team that has a lot of potential. I want to see them go out there and prove it. Like you said, playing at Baylor to open up the year is going to be tough, and I think it's a game they could certainly lose. But you can still play your way into the playoff with this conference schedule. So I think Auburn, fun team this year, Nick. As always, appreciate you joining me.
Yeah, certainly looking forward to seeing what this team can do. Hugh Freeze is a hell of a coach here. He's got a great roster, a great quarterback, and an incredible wide receiving room. Can the pieces be finally put together to complete the puzzle of a winning record down the plains? Only time will tell.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.